Welcome to another episode of The Crow's Nest. I'm your host, Christopher Corvo, and on today's episode, we will be discussing The Peaceful Warrior Saga by Dan Millman. And I have with me in the nest two guests to try to unpack this subject. I have the legend Robert Avery, and I have Darius Ramos, known as a friend of the program. And we're lucky to have Darius. Darius has been spending his summer wandering the countryside, wandering this fair country, doing exploits of manual labor. And he reminds me of a modern day Bruce Banner in that scene when he's just walking down this desolate, lonely road, not knowing where the next turn might take him. And I think these two candidates, these two guests, are excellent choices to try to present this book series to you, because both of them have been touched deeply from it. They are almost like disciples of this series, and I'm going to leave this episode really in their hands. They are going to captain this ship and try to impart to us what about this book series touched them and has changed them for the better. So without further ado, I give you our next conversation. So I hope you enjoy.
To echo what Chris said, thanks, Darius. We've been trying to. He's like the white buffalo, I guess, or not white buffalo, the white whale. What am I talking about? The white whale guest here. He's back, baby. He's back in the nest. So first, there's no one that respects manual labor more than Chris Corvo. I can tell you that right now. That's what he loves, that you're going down there and just building shit. I know deep down he loves that. Am I wrong?
This is true. No, you're right.
Right.
You've moved up into my mental cabinet. You're now a top shelf person. You're a top shelf kind of guy.
Manual labor is. I also respect it. It brings character. If your hands are too smooth and clean, that means you haven't been doing a lot of hard work, in my opinion. So it's an old school mentality.
I just came up with a saying: calluses build palaces.
They literally do. I fuck with that. Well said. So I'll kick it off with just an introduction to Dan Millman in the books. Basically, it's a series of books where it's almost as a lifestyle, a perspective on existence, and it's told through stories. So the books came out of order. The first one was called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which is where Dan Millman tells the story of himself meeting almost a mentor type figure, a philosophical, like, theologian type figure. And he's, not to give away the books because I think everyone should read the book, but in summary, he learns a lot from this person. And then the second book, Darius can correct me if I'm wrong, the second book was The Sacred Journey, right? With Mama Chia.
Yeah.
That's the second one. And then the third one is when he tells the origin story of his mentor, who's called Socrates. And it's called The Journeys of Socrates. So let me just kick this off with a quote. It'll kind of give you a taste of just what the books are about in general. And this is a direct quote from the book. Enlightenment is not an attainment. It is a realization. And when you wake up, everything changes and nothing changes. So I'm just going to let that sit. And Darius, it's just, I think you're more well-versed in this than I, so you give your take and just get us going here, intro-wise.
Yes, sir. Thank you, fellas, for having me back. Yes, I have been in them fields, but here we are. So, as you said, Dan Millman, not just an author to me, but literally, if I were to meet him, he would be my mentor. It's like I've learned so much from this guy and how he portrays the story in all these books. It's really amazing. I've never had really something change my life the way that these books really have. There are others as well. You look up online and many disciples just like us, the apostles, you say. Starting off, Dan Millman, those three books, you missed a book. In the end, there's actually the Hidden School, which is part of the saga. Now, the journeys of Socrates isn't necessarily in those with those three books, but it is definitely connected. It is the backstory of the person that you're reading about in these three books for the most part. If you look on Dan Millman's website, he has information on all these books. And in my opinion, he has it wrong the way that you should actually read the books. The way that he has you should read the books is the way that Rob first described them. You have The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which is really, in my opinion, the most outstanding of the books and like groundbreaking.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
And then you have The Sacred Journey of the Peaceful Warrior, and then you have The Hidden School. Now, those two last books that I mentioned are actually like in the timeline of Way of the Peaceful Warrior. So it's like if you wanted to read it in chronological order, it would be Way of the Peaceful Warrior for like the first 80% of it. Then you have to read those two other books and then read the last 20% of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. That's how the timeline goes for those three. Now, the Journeys of Socrates, which in my opinion you should absolutely read first, is way before all of those three books. Now, it goes into a man's life named Sergei Ivanov back in Russia, in Tsar-controlled Russia, 1800s, late 1800s. And put in perspective, this man did not live an easy life. After reading this book, you're like, wow, my life is great. Day he was born, the reason why his mother gave birth and went into labor is because his brother fell off the roof and died. Caused shock. She went into labor, had the child, then died from the pregnancy, from giving birth. So right off the bat, this kid is riddled with bad luck. And to make matters worse, his father is actually a bodyguard to the Tsar. So he's high-end military, doesn't have time for him. So he gets shipped off to his grandparents on his mother's side to live until his father puts him in military camp. From there, this man's life, his boy's life, because he's literally 4 years old, 5 years old, going into military camp, is crazy. Lives life on the fringe, never has a solid home until he's way older. It's a crazy story. We could get into his story like that, but from the beginning, you understand that he's different than everyone else. He's in military camp. He's a lot smaller than everyone else as well, but that's not what makes him different. It's you could tell the enlightenment within him already at such a young age, and that's what encaptured me first. And then his story is even crazier.
I can jump in. So, like, what Darius is saying is the Journey of Socrates. The book is it's more of a story than the other ones, and the story itself is he starts wandering through the woods, but I think before that, doesn't he suffer another traumatic event where he falls in love with a girl and she's pregnant, but then these Russian, yeah, I can't ruin it. All right, so
it's like you could. I want to like tell you because it's like I want to like so bad.
We shouldn't do that though. Don't ruin
the whole story.
Yeah.
But it's like without telling the whole story, it's so difficult to really embody like what he's gone through and like the trials and tribulations. Like I said, his mother and brother died right off the bat. It's pretty much everyone this man encounters in his life ends up dying. Like that he loves and holds like near and dear to him. And it's never his fault and things are always out of his control. And he always takes the high road. He goes for vengeance and then realizes two wrongs don't make the right. And then once he realizes that's when things really kick off. And he learns this from, he gets training from a few, like Zen masters, and he gets shipped off to this remote island deep in Russia where the only certain monks live. And he gets training for years, like as like an elite ninja battler. So he's like an elite combat. Like there's that aspect of it as well. So if you're into that, it's like there's so much into it. And for me, when I first read the book, before reading the book, it's like sometimes in your life you feel something missing and you don't exactly know what it is. And I read the book and I was like, I know what's missing and I know how to fulfill it as well. Dan Millman is huge into meditation, which is has a lot to do with these books as well, and they get into that. So there's so much here that these books really cover. It's like it's hard to just like compartmentalize and even talk about. It's the ideas are insane. Quotes. I've written notes on the books, and there's many quotes as well. Rob kicked it off with one of them, but it's just like simple things like life is ever changing, and life it's not a private affair. A story and its lessons are only made useful if they're shared, and that's something that opened me up because it's like if I had never read these books, I don't even know if I'd be on these podcasts talking and being able to like speak the way that I do, because it opened me up in ways like emotionally and things like that, in a way that a book that I thought never could. It's absolutely insane. Like it's insane. And you could speak on that too, because how passionate was I when I was reading these books about it? Like I would come into work and I got you to read it. I got a whole bunch of people to read it. Like it was.
Sorry, I want the audience to know straight up the reason why I read this book is because of the man you were just listening to, Darius Ramos. And like he said, I think you alluded to it a little bit, but I'm gonna put it down concretely. The thing about this book is this: yeah, the story is cool. It's very interesting. It's engrossing. Actually, it's a cool just story as prose or like as an novel. But what's happening there? Is that Ridgewood, New York?
You're hearing the Fresh Pond Road. The motorbikes are out there a rumbling.
Yeah, we got the gang.
Sorry about that.
All right, so the profound, the true profound part of the saga is how it makes you feel, and what, more importantly even than that, is how it makes you think about your own existence and what does existence mean, and it gives you an entirely different perspective on your life. And as you said, it changed the way his diet, it changed his nutrition, it changed the decision-making process that he would go through with all these things. And then when I read it, it did the same thing for me. I started exercising. I changed my diet entirely. Nutrition, no sugar, only natural things like this. The story is good, yes, but what it leaves you with, how it makes you change your life and think about things. That's the craziest part for me. Is it's hard to explain it, but it made me think about everything in a whole new way.
Okay, so just to take some of the things you just mentioned and try to synthesize it a little bit. So from what I'm gathering, in this first book, on the journey of Socrates, you're introduced to this character who, through a variety of situations, achieves what we call, quote unquote, let's say he's on the path towards enlightenment. And later in this series or this world, he ends up becoming the teacher for another character who we begin to meet in these other books, right? Is that correct?
Yes, and that's what I wanted to get into. I wanted to paint the story of, you could call him Socrates, first in the journeys of Socrates, because lo and behold, there's an actual relationship between the author and Socrates in real life, not fiction. These stories, you read them and they're fictional stories, but you read them more and you understand towards the end that these stories are actually tailored from Socrates' journal that he gave Dan Millman. And all of these are based on true events of Socrates' life. And then the latter books are events of Dan Millman's life.
Okay, so this is not fiction. This is biographical in nature, or at least the heart of the story is biographical. Correct?
Yes. It's like in the beginning of a film where it says not based on a true story, inspired by a true story. It's more of the way. It's not fact for fact what's happening, because there is some fictional elements to it, but it's based in truth, and some of Dan Millman's real life does come into the stories as well.
So this character of Socrates, this person that becomes Dan Millman's mentor, or the character that is Dan Millman, he is a real person. There was actually a mentor-like figure that embodied the qualities and the persona of this quote-unquote fictional Socrates. But in reality, there's this archetype that he used. There's someone in his mind that he's thinking about as he's writing this book and the story and this character.
He's a physical person, and to give it away, it's his great-grandfather. Yeah. So he actually gives that information out at the end of Journeys of Socrates as like an afternote to the story of Journeys of Socrates, and that's what dropped my jaw. So I was introduced to this book by a very good friend of mine who is also on the path to enlightenment. He's, in my opinion, ahead of anyone that I know. And when he introduced this book to me, he only introduced the Journeys of Socrates, and I read the Journeys of Socrates, and then I read the afternotes of the author. And that's when Dan Millman said, hey, this book that I just wrote is my great-grandfather. And he didn't find that out until after Socrates had passed away, and they had shared years and years together as Socrates being his actual mentor in real life. Yeah.
Wait, what? So
he didn't know that he was his
great-grandfather,
but he knew that he was his mentor.
Now, did Socrates know that his mentee was his great-grandson?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Shit, this is a crazy story.
It's fantastic, yeah. And it's almost as if he was molding him in the ways, knowing that this is like a couple generations, he's my lineage, but it was unbeknownst to Dan Millman the whole time. So it kind of gives you that it's even more appealing that way to me.
Okay, so I don't want you to give away too much of the general story, because now I'm intrigued by it. And anyone who's listened to at least this point it's probably been enough to whet their taste buds and get someone to want to read it. Right? Already with my left hand, I'm starting to stroke the keys and try to figure where I can download this book. So, job well done. So, let's try to expand on some of the themes and ideas in this book, and let me try to think how to bring this up. Let's look at it in two ways. So it sounds like, Darius, you were seeking something to fill some type of hole that was in your life or in your mind, and you found this book. So what about this book, or what about the teachings in this book stand out amongst all the other ideas, thoughts, books that are out there? Because it's not as if we live in a world where that's void of people trying to help others, or wisdom or philosophy to help guide you towards a better life. So what about this particular character, Socrates, and his teachings were so pinnacle to you that you would call yourself an apostle? You know, someone who's tried to embody these ideas in your
I think
in your
first
own life.
of all, you'd have to give credit to Dan Millman and how he actually writes these life lessons down, and how they're so easily digested in the storyline that is in this saga. I've read books like you have Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. Very, very, very similar ideas to what Dan Millman writes and what Socrates teaches Dan in these books. But for me, it was the stories and the adventures that you read in the Journeys of Socrates, and more particularly The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's what encaptured me, and it's not just the stories. It's very, very, you could say, philosophical in a way. He breaks things down like what there's like questions of like, why are there so many religions, and why are there, why do people worship different gods and things like that? And these questions get answered, like, and it's like, how did the universe start? And like, how did like myths like mermaids and things like all through history like occur? And all these questions, that like bizarre questions that like you wouldn't think have ever like would ever have like an answer. It's like kind of makes sense and like in the way that like is like they're told in this book. And these books go through these questions. And they're told in story from Socrates to Dan. Or there's also another character in this saga who is probably Rob's favorite, maybe my favorite over Socrates as well. A woman named Mama Chia, native to Molokai Islands of Hawaii. This woman is also a real woman that Dan Millman encountered in his life. And I feel like I encountered her in my life because I read these books. She's particularly in the sacred journey of the
sacred journey,
yeah.
the peaceful warrior.
But yeah, she literally takes words out of my mouth when thinking about her, because to think that people like that existed on Earth to make an impact on someone, to go ahead and write a book like this, is spine chilling to me.
Yeah, it's really wonderful stuff, because like I couldn't agree more than what you say, and I know we agree all the time, but Darius said it best. He's well said there, but it's the way that because sometimes people think I'm going to teach you a life lesson, and it comes off as you're getting lectured. I'm being told this is the best way to do it. The good thing about Millman and his writing is he uses that energy and he tells it through storytelling, and through the stories is where you get the lessons. So it's not those self-help books where it'd be like, these are the 15 best ways to make yourself happy, forget about money and all that other bullshit, right? It's telling you real stories that happened to him, and how that's why it says it's enlightenment. It's not something you can obtain and attain. It's something you realize. It's within all of us already. We all have it in us. We just need to realize it. And that's why I think his storytelling approach is a very conducive way to essentially hand out these life lessons.
So what I'm getting from you guys, other than the fact that Darius has a smile ear to ear as he's thinking about this book and he's talking about it, so that's a review in and of itself. But it sounds like some of the part of the appeal that, and both of you have said it, is that the way he's taken these ideas that he's learned through his own experiences and were taught to him, it's the story itself that's almost the greatest vehicle to get these ideas out, right? He's not giving a lecture. He's not presenting a philosophical discourse. He's telling a story that's hit him intimately, because it's his own story, and you can't help but extract the wisdom in that story. Hearing these characters dialogue, who are real people, dialogue with each other, you can't help but, like, through osmosis, absorb the lessons they learned through their own personal experiences. So it's the story that really keeps you into it. Were there ever times where you were just reading it and enjoying the story, and days later, in your mind, you've distilled that story into the lesson, and you're like, oh shit, that adventure, there's the lesson. It wasn't clear to me as I read it and as I enjoyed it, but now a day later or days later, the story kind of strips away and you get to the meat, to the actual lesson. Did you have a lot of epiphany moments where the light bulb would go off like a day or two later?
Yeah, definitely. Day later. I'll go even further. I read the books a few times over, and each time you read them, you get a different lesson from the same story. You realize that it could be placed in different parts of your life and used in different aspects as well. Bobby said it best. Yeah, it changed me. It changed my diet. It changed the way that I exercise. Chris, you know it. You were big into stretching as well. It changed like how like big into stretching I got. The sugar thing, I cut out sugar for over 12 months, 15 months, 18 months. I went no sugar. I went 12 months, no snacks at all, no like candy bars, no chips, nothing like that. And that was all due to the book. And it was like I went really hard lines with what it was saying at first, but I felt like I needed that like cleanse with like the diet at least. And it changed my overall outlook. I was very headstrong, very analytical, didn't give much thought to just letting go and just, letting the emotions flow and things like that. It changed that as well. I'm sure you guys could see it now. I'm so different from when we worked back months, years ago at this point. So to say the least, it's like crazy what it's done for me. And I think when we were working, Rob and I saw Birchin had read the book, and Mike had read the book. And I think you guys all read it because you saw how it was changing me. Not because how like much I was talking about it, but really, it really did. It changed me as a person and how I view things, and my philosophical views on many things are like coming from this book. I walked in one day and I told Rob, I think this is what got Rob to actually read the book. I walked in one day, I was like, this book is like, to me, is like the holy scriptures. It was like that to me. Like I was so enlightening to me. It was like reading the Bible.
Yeah, it was your Torah. It was your Old Testament. And he's exactly right. So there's like three things I want to say. So first, I want to tell a story of Seraphim, and Darius knows who he is. So don't let me forget to tell that, because I want to say one thing first, and he's right. It's, you get recommendations from people, and you're like, okay, I'll check this out. Hey, watch this movie. Hey, check out this television show. I think it's cool. I think it's funny. I think it's educational. I think it's interesting. But when you see it change someone's lifestyle for the better, and then you see them almost in a calmer state, in a lot of times a more meditative state, in a more analytical state, in a state where they're aware of their existence and how it affects not just them, but their outside world. When you see that, something like that, that's perfect. That's powerful. That's a powerful thing to happen. And that's, like you said, that's what rubbed off on me, and that's why I jumped right onto it. But another thing is Socrates hates thoughts. He hates thoughts not just in itself, it's just how we use them as humans. So I wanted to say that. And that's what one of the big things I took the most out of this is it's natural. I think Darius said it. It's natural to have emotions. It's natural to have a thought pop in your head. It's natural to have an idea. Now, what separates everyone is what you do with that thought, what you do with that idea, what you do with that emotion. That's what builds your character and tells everyone. Don't try to suppress those natural energy forces. That's the wrong thing to do. That's what a lot of people get wrong. And they're misguided in that sense. Don't suppress those quote-unquote symptoms. Use them, but use them correctly. And that's the whole idea about Socrates. Right, so I think I remembered. I can go back to Seraphim now. So Seraphim is like, he's one of the like sages that Sergei, aka Socrates, encounters, and he was told to visit. And there's a quote from Seraphim who's full of just like incredible one-liners on just how to live your life. And it's something about a weapon. Do you remember that one, Darius? I'm trying to find it. It's like he said, don't fear the weapon, fear the person wielding the weapon. There's something, alright, you guys go, I'm gonna get the exact actual quote. I got it. Alright, hold on. Never fear the weapon, only the man wielding it. Focus on your opponent while he focuses on his knife or his saber or his pistol. He invests in the power of the object, but he forgets the rest of his body. I couldn't even describe how you can use that in all facets of life. Don't fear the material thing that's being wielded. focus on your body reaction, and to bring it back full circle, focus on how to use that. Sometimes you have fear, sometimes you have anxiety, sometimes you have depression, sometimes you're happy, you're sad, you're anxious, you're nervous. Use that. Forget about the material portion of it. Use the energy correctly, and you're going to find fulfillment in your life.
Yeah, Seraphim he's in the latter part of the journeys of Socrates, and you could think of Seraphim as one of Socrates' many mentors, but one of his main mentor that you probably read the most about, because that's probably what Dan got the notes from. He's probably Socrates probably wrote the most about Seraphim, so you could just see the impact that this man had on Socrates, and Socrates is the modern day Buddha in these books. He's like pretty much portrayed as. So was it Sarah? Oh no, that was so. There's actually also another mentor that he goes through before Seraphim, who sends him off to Seraphim, Master Razin, and he teaches him a lot of lessons as well. I don't have any notes on that right now, but he's also another very interesting character in these books, that a lot of zingers and lessons, quick little lessons that really get you thinking. And it's when I started to read this part of the book is when it really, really got me going. When reading about Razin and Seraphim and seeing, things like that. He also said, I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's also about a weapon, and it's the warrior's best weapon is his sword, but I don't want to botch it. I'll get it. Yeah, you guys go. I could find that one because I think I have that one written down.
So I have a question as I'm listening to you talk about this. As you were reading these books and you're processing the material and you're having your own realizations, you're putting dots together, and you're starting to actually change your life around. Were there moments of pain where you had to start to give up certain things, certain ways of thinking or trains of thought? Was there a pain period in this process? Because I'm looking at a quote from Carl Jung, and he says something to the effect of, there's no coming to consciousness without pain. And enlightenment is a coming to consciousness. You're trying to break down barriers, and usually there's a pain that goes along with it, because you're trying to undo certain trains of thought, certain ways of thinking that in a way have been defense mechanisms, and they've served you in a way, otherwise you wouldn't do them. So when you were reading this, were there moments of where you started to pull back, where you're like, I believe this, but I don't want to go through that struggle to realize this idea?
I'll go first quickly because it's a real quick, concise answer. At first, it's like, no, naturally, it's like these things feel right and you want to do them. But I'll give away the first step to doing them, which is it's clearly written in The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And the first step is meditation. And physical pain, of course, meditation, physical pain, that's not a thing. But the actual mental pain of trying to stick with the meditation at first was very, very difficult. It's not easy to just sit there for 5 to 10 minutes and do something that you're not used to ever doing, which is letting your thoughts just go and not being attached to them or not physically wanting to think. So it was definitely the meditation. That was the step one for me, which I encountered the pain at.
Yeah, so everyone is familiar with the saying, no pain, no gain, right? And that's usually related to a physical thing, exercising, developing muscle, cultivating mass, and then harvesting muscle and things like this. It's used more, and especially in sports. You work hard, you train hard, you practice hard. You need to deal with pain. And while you're playing the game, you're going to deal with physical pain. So, but also, I think Chris was subtly trying to ask this. There's a mental pain to it. There's an emotional and spiritual pain where you realize who you really are. And sometimes that's a scary thing for people. That's a painful thing to look at, to see yourself for who you really are. Be vulnerable. Don't deny yourself. Don't be in denial to yourself. Because that's the worst thing you can do. And this book does a great job of showing you how there's going to be a long, tough road to achieve this, but it's completely worth it because this is the way, I hesitate to say meant, but this is one of the healthiest ways you can live your life, both physically, or not both, in all aspects, physically, spiritually, and mentally. It's like a triangle. So we're all, allow me to rant for a little bit, every human being is a circle and a triangle. Okay? So I'm going to do this, boys. So just, it's like, it's going to be like you're on Nitro at Six Flags right now.
Are we delving into alchemy?
Yeah, we're going to go into a geometric biological setup here. So we're all humans are two things. We're all circles and we're all triangles. The triangle is the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. Okay? If you don't have the physical, if you don't exercise or eat right or tone your body or get those toxins out, release the sweat and the energy, there's no triangle. There's no triangle without the physical. Just like there's no triangle without the mental. If you don't read and sharpen your mind and think critically and question things and debate and have discourse and do things like this podcast, you're not going to have the mental part of it. So there's no triangle. The spiritual part is what I think Dan Millman was tapping into is there's a certain way. There's no one path, but there's a certain way you need to think and in order to feed your spirit. Meaning, you gotta come to that realization that you're everything and you're nothing at the same time. Okay? So you're your own universe, but you're also a speck of dust in the actual universe. You have to be self-aware and realize this. That's where the spiritual side comes in. All right? So, once again, without the spiritual side, there's no triangle. You need all three. You need all three operating in optimal form. Okay? That's where you achieve enlightenment. Then we have the circle part. So all of us have our own characteristics. Darius is very good at computer coding and he's intelligent about a ton of other things. I may be better at reading lost textbooks. All right, so just as a trite example, but we're each good at our own things, and we shouldn't let ourselves beat each other up for the things that we're not good at, because we're all pie charts. So Chris Corvo gets the military manual labor slice of the pie is bigger than mine. So but it's still there. We all still have the same slices. They're just different sizes. But what's equal with all of us is we're all circles of the same diameter and circumference. So we're all the same. We just have different slices where our abilities and talents are other things. And I think Dan Millman and Socrates and Mama Chia and Seraphim and what is his name, Master Rousing, they're all just ways of telling us those two things. You need to sharpen your whole existence. You need the triangle to be sharp and equilateral. And we need to realize that we're all the same, but we all have different skills. And that's pretty much what that book taught me in like a 2-minute monologue. It's what that taught me.
So I'm wondering, as you guys were reading these books and undergoing this change, what did the other people around you in your life think? Because it's kind of interesting now, putting two and two together, because you and I, Rob, have talked about your change. This, as you would call it, you stopped living your life as if your life was an amusement park.
I was treating my body as an amusement park. Correct.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then there was this end to that, this break, which it sounds like, if I have the timeline right, kind of it kind of coincides with the reading of this book. Am I wrong in that, Rob?
You're not wrong at all. So when Darius put me onto this book and I started reading it, that's when I bought a membership to a gym that I would not even remotely even dreamt of purchasing before that. But I realized that I was ignoring the temple. The body was the temple. I was ignoring it. I was actively destroying it, actually, with my trash diet. And like we said in that other episode, the suicide episode, which is like you said, a heavy topic, but is one of the best ones, actually, if anyone wants to check that out. I was actively destroying the temple. If the temple's crumbling, how can I worship? If there's nothing, there's no palace of worship. Like you said. To see what I did there, I brought it all the way back. But that's the cool thing about this whole thing was it all coincided, and that's why I think the universe there's no coincidences. It's a powerful thing. I was reading this book at a time where I was in such disarray in my life, and then I got back on track. I got healthier than I've ever been in my entire life, and then also at the same time changed my perspective on what a career is, what my life is, what should I look for in a relationship, what do I want, how do I want to leave my imprint on existence, and I couldn't stress enough how important this book is for anyone looking. If you feel lost in any way or confused, this will direct you in the right way so you can find your own purpose and what you want to leave behind in this existence. Because that's really all of it's about. We want to enjoy existence and we want to leave some kind of legacy.
Amen to that, man. That ending is so well said. It's if you just got that feeling of just, you don't know what the next step is in your life, whether it's work wise, whether it's a relationship wise, whether it's you don't even know wise. For me, it was more of like, I don't even know like what's next. It's like, but there's always something next, because life you're always changing and you always want to be adaptable to that change. And at first, I don't think I wanted to be adaptable to change. And reading the books afterwards made me realize that change is awesome, and change is what brings excitement in life. And I wouldn't have realized that without the books. So Dan Millman has shown me the way. And I'm sure people like Jordan Peterson, there's no doubt in my mind, like he's read these books, and like him and Dan Millman like spitball ideas off of each other and things like that, because it's all in that realm. But in my opinion, as I was saying earlier, Dan Millman just makes it that much easier to relate to, whether you could relate to the story or just how great his writing is, thanks to the notes of Socrates and his experiences. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna punctuate your statement with a quote from Way of the Peaceful Warrior, because it almost is to a T what you said. Life has 3 rules: paradox, humor, and change. Paradox: life is a mystery. Don't waste your time trying to figure everything out. Number 2, humor. Keep a sense of humor, especially about yourself. It is a strength beyond all measure. Lastly, change. Know that nothing will ever stay the same. So think about it. We can do an entire podcast on just those 3 things right there. But that's what I've realized in my life, and I'm sure Darius can say the same. Stop trying to figure. There's no one way to live life. It's a mystery. There's no one. It's not a Rubik's Cube that you can figure out. It's different. It's ever changing, and it's because it's ever changing. Nothing stays the same. And one of his favorite characteristics or human traits is humor. One of my favorite traits is comedy and humor, and especially about your own self. It's beyond measurable, he said, how powerful that is. So Chris, what do you think about that?
Hey, I'm kind of taken back by both of you guys right now because I'm hearing words come out of your mouths that, I don't know, I feel like you're tapped into something. So for me, it's kind of an honor to be here listening to you guys talk about this stuff because it's all truth daggers. There's no fluff. It's pretty pure and to the point. I'm curious, when you look up this guy, Dan Simmons. Millman, sorry.
Dan Millman, yeah.
I don't know who Dan Simmons is. Why? There's not a lot.
Dan Simmons is selling you your groceries across the street.
Maybe. He's deep in my unconscious. I don't know how he did it. Inception. But there's not a lot that comes up. You don't see too much. I mean, when you Google his name, you see the books, you see some reviews, you'll see the website. But it doesn't seem like if you were to look up Tim Ferriss, millions upon millions of reviews, pages, people commenting on him, people reviewing his stuff, all this stuff. Any of these kind of lifestyle gurus or what have you. Why is it that this particular guy, why does he seem to go relatively unnoticed? Like, what is the community like around him? Or maybe I'm really far off and I just don't know where this community lies. But it just seems that nothing comes up when you don't see huge Reddit pages. You don't see a lot of people talking about his books. Because let's be honest, in today's day and age, people like to talk about everything. So I kind of found that interesting that Dan Millman, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of buzz around him. Which honestly, for those listening, that's probably a good thing.
You know what it is? I never really thought of that, but you're right. You're definitely right. He does not have as much as a following as others in that industry. There is a following. There are, you could see him on Reddit, like forums every once in a while. He's on the forums talking about him. But really quick, just thinking about it, I just think it's because he's not selling this lifestyle to you. I don't think he wrote these books for monetary value whatsoever. He didn't get into this because of that. He got into this because he lived such a life that is so crazy compared to everyone else that he just needed to get it out there because there's so many good things in his life that he's like, wow, I need to write this. And it actually goes through in the books. There's hints, Mama Chia hints like, yeah, you should start maybe thinking about writing some of this down because you can, you have a gift and it's like maybe writing. And that's maybe what pushed him to write these books. But not to teach a lesson and to be in your face and to school someone to be like, you want enlightenment? Read my books. I don't think he was like that. I think he was like Socrates is very much in the moment person. If something happens, it happens. Everything doesn't happen for a reason, but there are no accidents. So there wasn't a reason that I actually picked this book up, but it wasn't an accident that my friend told me about this book. And then I went on and read the rest of the books, went on, told him about it. And then he read the rest of the books and changed his life as well. And, now we're here on a podcast talking about it. So I think that's what it is. I think he just wrote these books and was like, I want to be an author and tell my story. And whoever reads it, I hope it changes lives. And it has. That is, personally, for me, it has.
It's because I think, Chris, you hinted at it a little bit earlier. This is not, and Darius also said it, this is not a Tony Robbins lecture to you. This is how you're going to achieve happiness. It's a life force. It does it organically on its own. It flows through people and into new people, right? If you think of it that way, that's the best way to think about it. And it's definitely not for monetary reasons, because there's actually specific quotes where, remember, I think Darius and I had a specific conversation about it. He says, put away all the material and financial things. Don't enjoy more, learn to enjoy less. And learn to enjoy the simple. Because that's really the true nature of existence.
It's the basic principle of everything that is written in all the books.
That's awesome. Can you go through one more time the order of the books you suggest reading?
Definitely, my opinion, Journeys of Socrates, number one. Then go ahead and immediately read Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Read it through, all the way through. Then you have Sacred Journey of the Peaceful Warrior. Then you have The Hidden School. You got to read the first two. The first two are must reads. I think that if you end up reading the first two, it's going to encapsulate you enough to want to read the latter two.
So the first one is The Journey of Socrates, and then you'd say the second one you'd
Yes.
recommend is the Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Yeah, I'm going to read these.
It's right up your alley, Chris. You will enjoy it thoroughly.
And it's like, you've brought this book up to me many times, and I've just never gotten around to reading them. But honestly, listening to you guys talk, I can see how it's changed you. Which, as you've said, Rob, earlier, when you see someone change, you're more likely to want to try out or read or do the thing that led them to that change, right? It's easy to recommend something, but when you see change, it makes you want to be the one asking, what did you learn? What did you read? Why are you changing? What led you down that journey? So that's pretty amazing. So just to wind this off, Dan Millman lives in Brooklyn. So have you ever thought to reach out to him?
I have, but I don't think I'm ready because I don't know what I would ask him just yet. But I think one day I will know, and when that time comes, I will reach out.
Okay. Do you think that he was ready for Socrates, or do you think that Socrates knew he was ready and sought him out?
You got to read the books. That's answered.
So how about this then? What would you took so much from these books. So if you had to summarize, or you could, only write him one sentence. You can't even write him a letter. Only one sentence. What would you want him to know? Or how would you encapsulate the amount of value you've got from these books?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for letting me see my way.
It's incredible. And as I hate to keep harping on this aspect of it, but he taught us the way, quote unquote, through traditional storytelling and not a checklist outline of what you need to follow. It's so much better when you tell it through your own personal experience and story, because then you activate your emotions and your feelings and everything else that's a part of the human experience with it. It's easy to go through a list and these are the things and check them off, right? It's more pragmatic that way. But the way he does it through the art of storytelling is the most genius part of it for me.
Yeah, I would say storytelling resonates with you more than anything. I know that's something that always grips you. When we talk about True Detective and things like that, it's a storytelling element.
It's an art. It's a fucking art. It's the art. It's maybe the oldest art. I could be just making that up, but it's one of the oldest art, oral tradition.
Remember, stories were meant to convey information in a way people would remember and memorize. So it sounds like, to Darius, to what you said, this is one of Dan's many gifts, his ability to convey these deep, eternal truths in a way that a modern society could value.
So easily digest.
Do you see, I guess this is my last question, do you see in the world that we live in and with the people you interact with, do you see a need for the wisdom in these books? And I like what you said, Rob, because you said something very profound, and that's that the wisdom there is not. It's not as if he's invented something. It's that there's a continuum, a long chain, a flow of this logos, this wisdom that is eternal, and kind of finds its way into different peoples at different times, and is re-encapsulated in a way that a form that a certain time can digest. So do you think like the people around you, the people that are our age, are hungry for a lot of the stuff that's in this book. Like there's a need there, which, for example, that's why you two gravitated to this book. Like you guys were starving, and this book contained a food that you needed but never knew was perhaps edible.
That's a loaded question. Do they need it? Fucking A right, they need it, for sure. Do they crave it? That's a harder question to ask. I'm going to lean toward no. There's just so many distractions, guys. There's so many distractions, technology, socially, economically, financially. No, it's this is not on the forefront of many people's minds, and it's a shame, really, because it could change your life and be the catalyst for you achieving the potential as your human existence, as for what you need, right? You do need that sense of enlightenment. Everyone needs to be enlightened. It should be seen as that way, but most people don't, because, like Chris said in the very beginning, it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to meditate. It's not an easy thing to seek to better yourself. You know what's easy? Going on your iPhone and playing a video game. That's easy. Alright, so that's why I think, do they need it? To answer your question, do they need it? 100% they need it. They want it. That's a tough one. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think
we all definitely need it. Every single person needs it for sure. And meditation is deep into this book. Look at practices of meditation. There's a study, look up, I'm sure you could find it. They hold meditation like seminars, classes in like underprivileged neighborhoods around America for months. And what happens? The crime rate in those areas dropped dramatically. And it's all from beginner meditation. And if like those numbers are out there and it's proven and we're not doing more of it, that speaks on that question right there. Do we need it? Absolutely. Are we necessarily implementing it? No. Why? Because it's not on the forefront of people's minds for whatever reason.
Well said. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me on this one. This was an interesting conversation. Dan Millman, I apologize if you hear this. I didn't mean to mess up your name. There was some inception going on with my local grocer, but I value the work that you're doing, and I'm going to read the books, and maybe we'll do another episode after I've read them, and I can actually, we'll be on a similar footing, and we can really talk about some of the deeper ideas there. So, guys, thank you.
Yes. Can I leave everyone with a quote, and then you can sign us off afterwards?
By all means, go ahead.
Oh, God. I've just totally botched this. Okay, here we go. You have to lose your mind before you can come to your senses. There you go, everyone. That's it right there.
Chew on that for a couple of days, guys.
Let's see how that makes you feel.